After completing every level in Super Mario Wonder, one can come to appreciate and even enjoy the wide variety of obstacles that appear throughout the game. As things that block the path or hinder progress in any way, obstacles naturally form a challenge for the player and therefore provide a memorable experience. In Mario Wonder, there are 30 plus obstacles that appear throughout the game, and we are going to cover each one of them from least difficult to most difficult. Let's dive in, shall we? In our first category, one must be asking, are they even obstacles? Well, yes and no. Up first, we have water or water tide. At some points, water slows progress for the player, but most of the time, it actually helps you. Yes, it can be a mild hindrance, but it also allows your character to perform unique movement, especially with the addition of the dolphin kick badge. Even the pockets of water in some levels allow you to move around the level freely. Water definitely deserves to be first on the list. Similar to water, we have goo. This obstacle also slows character speed, but for the levels in which it appears, goo is absolutely necessary to navigate in order to complete those levels. Though movement is slower compared to water, goo is similar in that it allows characters to move in all directions, jump out of, and even use power-up abilities while inside. But unlike water, the dolphin kick badge is useless. Last in this category belongs to the current. Like water and goo, currents sometimes help you and sometimes slow you down. When swimming with the current, it can help by giving your character a slight boost in speed while underwater, but it can slow you down when swimming against the current. But even in this scenario, currents stand no chance against the dolphin kick badge. Our next category is obstacles that change the level's floor plan from normal to not so normal. These are obstacles that make running a little more difficult and therefore raise the chances of either falling or taking damage. Slightly hindering movement is ice. While ice only affects the stop and start speed of your character while on the ground, you have to admit that it can be a little annoying to deal with, especially when trying to avoid or damage enemies. I could say that ice caused me to take more damage than I'd care to admit, but really, it was caused by my blatant lack of awareness. Therefore, ice deserves to be pretty low on the list here. Our next groundbreaking obstacle is slime. Like ice, it is easy to expect slime to be a breeze to deal with, but if treated so, you're likely to lose a life, even more likely than ice due to the fact that when on slime, it is impossible to run in any direction. Rather, the slime carries you along like a water slide, in which the only course of action is to jump out of it. Thankfully, slime only appears during one level and only during a Wonder transformation, so it also deserves to be somewhat low on the list. Next, we have both honey and sand, which are grouped together because they act pretty much the same. Like ice, honey and sand slow the starting run speed of your character, but unlike any other floor, they both shorten your character's jump height, which can be extremely annoying when trying to land on platforms or avoid enemies. Honey and sand are not very difficult to deal with, but they do deserve to be the most difficult in this category. Slightly more inconvenient than our last category, the cover-up obstacles block or hide parts of some levels, which makes discovery a little more challenging, but perhaps more satisfying. The first obstacle worth covering, pun intended, is the cloud. Clouds often cover collectibles, some very important, some less important, mostly serving as an annoying blanket that the player would rather not be there. However, there is one particular scenario in which clouds offer a way to help the player understand their character's location, namely when equipped with the invisibility badge. Since the cloud helps, although rarely, it belongs low on the list here. The next cover-up is dark. Intended to conceal, dark makes discovery of important items a good deal more difficult, thus earning its spot here on the list. Though dark can also be annoying to deal with, there are mechanics in the game that allow your character to combat the obstacle, such as on and off switches, the slight glow around certain enemies, and even the use of power-ups like the fire flower. In our next category, these are the obstacles that barely count as an obstacle at all, meaning that they may stop progress or stand in the way of the player, but they are easy to navigate or are easily avoidable. Our first barely an obstacle is the Bowser statue. In Secrets of Shova Mansion, it appears during the Wonder transformation. To complete this part of the level, the player simply needs to run away from the statue rather than hurdle it. But I suppose it still counts as an obstacle simply because it is impossible to pass. The Bowser statue also appears in the final level of the story, in which it is turned to rubble by a herd of bulrushes, changing from an obstacle to a stepping stone in an instant. Making its Super Mario debut is the Bloop Pump. This obstacle, along with the rest of the obstacles in this category, deserves to be barely an obstacle at all, simply because the real obstacle is what it shoots out. It's a pointed enemy, the bloop, which can be slightly annoying to deal with by knocking your character sideways. Other than that, the bloop pump serves as merely a step stool to jump over, causing no problem at all itself. Up next is the cannon. Like the bloop pump, the cannon is not much of an obstacle alone, but rather what it shoots, bombs, which can actually cause damage. The real difficulty with cannons is that they appear on a level with a slow-moving camera, which makes it harder to avoid if you're doing the right thing by staying towards the front of the screen. Though unassuming, the cannon deserves a mid-tier placement. Similarly, we have the Bill Blaster. The main difference between this obstacle and the last one is that for one, the Bill Blaster sometimes appears much taller than any cannon in the game, and for two, it shoots enemies that are more difficult to dodge than bombs, often in groups of large number. The Bill Blaster definitely belongs here on the list. Need we say anything about how the Join Killer Blaster is next on the list? It's an obstacle that, wait for it, shoots heat-seeking bullet bills that are joined together. Come on. Okay, now we're finally getting to the real obstacles of the game. The ones that cause your character to take damage or possibly lose a life. These obstacles can combine the action of every other obstacle that we've covered so far, therefore making them some of the most dangerous. Probably the easiest to avoid and the least noticeable of these damage-inflicting obstacles is the Thundercloud. Though the Thundercloud can cause damage with one touch, it only appears in one level during a Wonder event, and it is rendered nearly ineffective with the use of the Star power-up during its appearance. Therefore, its placement on the list belongs here. Slightly harder to avoid is the Bowser Burner. In its battleship level appearance, a pull string is revealed next to each one, which, with good timing, changes the obstacle from somewhat difficult to easy to avoid. Still, with the auto scroll mechanic, the Bowser Burner can be pretty tricky. Next we have a classic Mario obstacle, the Spike Trap. One might think that the Spike Trap would probably be the easiest obstacle to avoid. Just don't fall into it, right? Well, it's a little more complicated than that. These obstacles come in many different shapes and sizes. They appear along the floor, along the ceiling, vertically on a wall, and even between platforms. With their carefully placed locations combined with their surface area, the Spike Trap can be one of the toughest obstacles in the game. Still though, it was extremely fun to run along the Spike Trap freely during the Goomba transformation. Next up is the Fire Wheel. The Fire Wheel is featured in a level in which the player is able to change the position of the obstacle by using a nearby pull string, making it easier to avoid, but not necessarily a breeze. It may seem unassuming, but one touch causes damage, so be careful around these. Our next obstacle is the Piston. These appear only in one area in one level throughout the entire game, so they can be easy to overlook, but they're bound to cause damage to an impatient and careless player due to their timed movement. So watch out for these and think twice about walking underneath one. Moving on to obstacles that are shot out toward the player, we have Volcanic Debris. Volcanic Debris appears only in a Wonder event, and whether it is easy to avoid is debatable. With its frequency and careful placement, it can definitely leave the player guessing where the next one will end up. Still though, with good movement and quick reaction time, the volcanic debris can be avoided. Another obstacle fired from a vessel is the Fireball. Due to its movement and the fact that they're always fired in numbers, can make this obstacle tricky to avoid. Fireballs force the player to tread slowly with caution, making patience its worst enemy. The only good thing about this obstacle is that, since the character is invincible for a short moment after taking damage, the following fireball is a breeze to avoid. Our next shocking placement is lightning. A very unique obstacle, lightning reveals when it is going to strike, forcing an instant wait or go decision. Combined with its ability to deal damage and its sometimes spiderweb looking pattern and sometimes appearing in groups of 3, lightning can be a problem. Still though, the real power of lightning lies in its ability to slow progress by causing the player to second guess. Similar to lightning is the electricity block. Like lightning, the electricity block appears before it strikes and forces the player to second guess their movement, but it appears more often and usually in greater numbers and more difficult patterns, making it more difficult to avoid. Plus, the fact that electricity can extend and be carried by certain enemies makes it unique and even more menacing. Up next is a worthy obstacle, the Knuckle. Imagine an obstacle much like the Piston, but coming at you in all directions and, well, on fire. Combine this obstacle with a platform that requires excellent timing and movement, and you've got yourself one difficult obstacle. The only saving grace about the Knuckle is that its punch can be predicted, That is, if you have decent rhythm. Good luck. Spinning its way towards the top of the list is the burner. Burners appear on a level where the player attempts to maneuver them while using a cloud. And since the cloud has a top speed of, "Are we there yet, Mom?" this obstacle can cause some headaches. Combine that with the obstacle's flexible movement, sometimes continual, sometimes stop and go. It definitely deserves this spot on the list. Coming close to the end here, we have the spike ball. The spike ball is especially annoying for many reasons. Sometimes they roll at you and then roll back at you. Sometimes they chase you, and sometimes they are shot at you when you least expect it, and even from the sky. And here we can even include the spike balls that are produced by spikes and tailies, making this obstacle have the most appearances throughout the entire game. The spike ball is the ultimate obstacle, hindering progress in nearly every way imaginable, therefore earning its spot very high on the list. If you are a Super Mario Bros. Fan, this next obstacle should be no stranger to you: the fire bar. Haunting the dreams of Mario players for years, the fire bar inevitably makes its appearance in Mario Wonder and earns its spot here on the list. There isn't much to say about the fire bar that most people don't already know. It affects every type of movement: running, jumping, landing on platforms, even dropping from the ceiling. Given that the fire bar normally appears in groups or even alongside other obstacles at the same time, this has to be one of the most difficult obstacles in the game. Another obstacle making its Mario debut is the rift. The rift has to be placed here on the list for one main reason: it hinders progress in two ways. It covers and it deals damage. Plus, it moves. I mean, in a creepy way. Because of this, the rift almost seems like an enemy more than an obstacle. The rift is quite the challenge to overcome, which can make the game either more rage-inducing or more satisfying to complete. Our last category, which makes up the top 3 most difficult obstacles, is precisely named No Touchy, meaning that if your character even grazes their toenail upon these obstacles, they're done for. That's right, these are the obstacles that you definitely don't want to mess around with. In third place, we have lava and poison. Grouped together because they serve the same function, lava and poison pretty much act as having no floor, but the ending is much cooler, I guess. Still, lava and poison count as an obstacle because it hinders the most progress of any other obstacle by sending you back to the last checkpoint or the beginning of the level. And an obstacle can be pretty intimidating when it just sits there and basically says, "Hey, don't fall," especially when the consequences are a pain. Imagine lava and poison, but as pillars that shoot out and force you to jump over them. Except you don't have to imagine it because it's actually in the game. We call it the lava and poison geyser. There's not much more to say about these obstacles because they're just a more terrifying version of their base form, as if they've somehow evolved. Taking the top spot, the number 1 placement belongs to the lava or poison tide. Not only is it lava or poison that moves, but it also naturally causes a panic, forcing the player to hurry and land on those platforms perfectly, or else. But even so, as the most challenging obstacle in the game, it gets the heart pumping and the adrenaline flowing, making the game more exciting. What did you think of this list? Are there any changes that you would make? Let me know down in the comments. Thanks for watching, and I hope you enjoyed. Take care, and